Hi everybody, Cindy and Gary here with Pathways Homestead, and as usual Gary starts out our trip driving, and we are going to the Ozarks Homestead Expo inside the Benton County Fair in Bentonville, Arkansas. So y'all, hey, we are going to go and teach again. Gary is teaching this time. He's teaching bacon curing and sausage making. So we'll see what kind of video that we can shoot and take you guys along as much as possible. Enjoy the ride, y'all. Alright y'all, we found an amazing barbecue joint here in Bella Vista, Missouri. It's just on the north side of the Arkansas border, and we had some really good food. Check out this footage of the food. Baked beans, fries, hot links, brisket, and pulled pork, and a roll. Looks like an amazing lunch, huh guys?
Yeah, looks good to me. We think it's important that people understand what it takes to make food. We live in a world right now where a lot of people don't know where the food comes or where the food goes. And that causes an imbalance in our understanding of a lot of things. It causes an imbalance in our understanding of value for a lot of things. And so we concentrate a lot on food. Another thing that we concentrate on even more than that is we are Jesus followers. And we're followers of Jesus, and meat plays a huge part in that for me. When I butcher, which I have butchered for a living at times, I've butchered most of our meat for years. When I butcher, it is a very stark reminder when I take an animal's life, shed its blood, to give us temporal life. It's a very stark reminder that Jesus' life was given, his blood was shed to give us eternal life. And so when I get to partake in meat, this is a blessing. And to me, when I'm butchering, when I'm cutting up meat, when I'm eating meat, it's a reminder of who I am and who our Creator is and what He's done for us. So this is a spiritual thing for me. And I just want to share that with you guys. And also we're going to talk today about, we're going to make sausage. We're going to try to make some bacon. And we're going to stuff some sausage, hopefully. So you guys told me that you were a butcher, or that you're hunting hogs and you want to know what to do with a lot of your trim. We're going to talk about that today, definitely. Does anybody here like bacon?
Love bacon.
Bacon's proof that God loves us, right?
Gold. That's right.
So we're going to talk about that today. The way we do things on our farm, being a budget-minded homestead or budget-minded farm, we are looking for low cash input. We're also, most of the time we're working other jobs too, so we're looking for expediency. And we have developed a system for making our own bacon that combines those. We've got a pork belly here today, and we'll get that out. And I laid it out to do bacon first, but I got to get this sausage going. So this is the Boston butt. For you guys that are just getting here, this is Boston butt. We're cutting it into about 1 by 2 inch cubes so that it'll go through our grinder. And you can see here that there's quite a bit of fat on the cover of this, and I purposely cut a piece with the fat on it. We want our sausage to be about 10 to 20% fat. There's a few reasons for that. One of it's for the way it cooks in the skillet, the way it binds it together, and another reason is for flavor distribution. Grease in the meat distributes flavor, and it also creates flavor. So for you guys that are using wild pigs, adding pork fat, adding like a domestic pork fat to your sausage helps. We do that with deer meat. We'll add 10% pork fat to that deer meat, and that helps the flavor and the consistency of it.
So are wild? We've never done a wild pig. Are they leaner than?
Yes.
Because
I've
they're
always
running
felt like they
around
are, don't you?
everywhere.
Typically
Yeah,
they
we
are.
killed some down here in Arkansas, and about Murfreesboro,
Yeah.
3/4 of an inch fat on it.
Oh, really?
Wow.
So they
So
had
they-
fat on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bacon flat.
I guess eat corn feeders or something, that big old patch of timber.
So they had access to something that would cook fat.
Must have.
Acorns, if it's the right time of year, acorns will put fat on them. Yeah.
They're everywhere.
We have not had to deal with that in Southeast Kansas, where we're at in Southeast Kansas yet. They did have a few years ago, found a domestic hog. Somebody was feeding his cattle in the wintertime and a hog come up. And so they trapped him real quick. Or her trapped him real quick.
You guys see this right here? You can see the little white pieces in along the pink meat. That's marbling. That's intermuscular fat. Part of the reason that a Boston butt makes such good pulled pork is because of the intermuscular fat. The most intermuscular fat you're going to find on a pig is in the Boston butt, and it'll make good sausage because of that too.
That makes a good roast.
Yeah, it makes a good roast.
How many hogs do you guys raise a year?
We raise about 20 hogs, go to the processor a year. We raise an old-fashioned pork. It's their GOS crosses. And we raise them in kind of a compost pile system. And they are, we finish our hogs out at a higher weight. I don't think a hog's finished at 270 pounds. I think a hog's finished at 350 pounds. And they got more fat on them, they've got more flavor, they've matured a little more. We're looking at 8-9-month-old hogs usually.
They're going to have more muscular fat.
Yep.
You're going to get a piece of bacon that's a nice sized piece of bacon, and not a thin little strip.
See, we were just talking about this. I like them a little thinner.
Now,
Oh, you mean with
she's not
slice?
talking about the slice, she's talking about
I
the
got
width.
you. I
Yeah.
got you.
Instead of
I got a 16-inch skillet and I want to put 5 pieces of bacon in it, not
Gotcha,
9.
so not this house
But
because
I'm
you.
like, I like it then.
Well, you're thinking of the
That's
slice.
the slice.
Thickness,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we're thinking of the depth of
Yeah.
the meat muscle that they're taking.
Now we're going to try and see if you guys can hear me over my meat grinder.
We may have to carry it off somewhere.
We'll see. We'll start, and if we need to, we'll start. Can you guys still hear me okay? Good? All right.
Cheryl told me
Yeah. Cheryl can't hear me, so I'm just going to make faces at her. Got her phone right there. While she's getting started on that sausage grind on that Boston butt, we're going to start on the bacon. So this is a pork belly that Cheryl purchased for us. And pork belly makes pretty good bacon. But I'm going to tell you there's way more cuts in a pig that'll make bacon than the pork belly. I think jow's better than the belly on a good fat hog. Also, the butt side of the debone that, you can make a slab, and it's called Arkansas bacon or cottage bacon. It makes a really good cut. Good meat. Here's the loin or the tenderloin. We call it Canadian bacon here in the States. They make fun of us for that in Canada. But that makes a good cut. You can take the round, which is the back leg, the ham, and you can slice it in a different shape. You can break it down to the top round and the bottom round, and it makes a bacon-like product. I love carbon bladed knives, old knives like Old Hickories and Ontario Knife Works. So when we cure bacon, we need a way to hold our product that we put on our bacon. We need a way to hold it through the meat. And there's ways you can do that. You can put it in a deep layer of the product, continue to turn it. And those are those expediency is important for me. How fast, how much time I have to spend at it. So I use Ziploc bags. And I'll put it in there with the product. We use salt product called Morton Tender Quick. And that is the base product for my bacon cure. Tender Quick. This product right here.
You said you used
Ziploc bags, I'm sure they work fine. Have you ever, like, vacuum sealed?
I have. When I tried to vacuum seal this process, I had trouble keeping all the salt and sugar out of the sealing area. That kind of grit caused me not to get a good seal, and I never could quite. If you're a lot neater, I'm a pretty sloppy person, so if you're a lot neater person, you might be able to let that happen. But I just had struggles with that. I tried that. It's a good idea. And I don't know if I know there's like the reusable sealable bags that you see those that have like a dent on the side of them. You might could use those. And where they dent out where you can seal them.
A glass bowl. You can use a glass bowl.
Yes.
One more time, what kind of meat, what kind of cut did you say that you're using for the bacon?
What was the question again?
What kind of cut did you say that you were using for the bacon? I was trying to take notes. I couldn't write fast.
This is a pork belly.
Oh, okay, pork belly.
Yeah. You want to use that one? So, the pork belly is from the back leg of the pig up to the front leg. It's the top of the ribs, the belly portion, and it goes all the way at the top to the loin. And that's the pork belly. Usually when you cut a pork belly, you lay the ribs off the inside of it, and that's your spare ribs. Can you see the fat streaks right there? That's where it was laid off the ribs. I'm trying to be politically correct and wear gloves. I don't do that. We're going to cook that meat at a high temperature. It'll kill anything that's on my hands. We're fixing to cover it with salt. That's right. I wash my hands. We're good, right? We're going to get out a couple of Ziploc bags here. One, two, three. Did I hear somebody ask something? Oh, okay. You guys can hear over that, but I'm not hearing over it very good. I lost my measure. So the point of curing is you pull moisture out of the meat and you replace it with a saline solution, a salt solution. We're going to do that today with this Tender Quick product by Morton, and we're going to use brown sugar. I'm going to tell you my recipe real quick. A tablespoon of Tender Quick, a tablespoon of brown sugar per pound of meat. It's that simple. We have, over the years, we've tried several different recipes. When I got started curing pork, I asked my grandpa about it because I knew that they had done that when he was young. I asked him, he said, well, all I remember is lots of salt, and it was really salty when we were done. He also told the story about getting in a grain bin after threshing peas, and one of his uncles said, well, there's still a side of bacon hanging in the top of this grain bin, and they sent it to the house and they ate it for supper, and it's been hanging there all summer. So, evidently had a lot of salt in it, right? But when I got started, I just began experimenting. And one of the things I always come up with is a product that was so salty I couldn't eat it. I've tried recipes I've found, I've read stuff in books, and I'm going to tell you my secret that I finally figured out. The recipe I use, I did get out of the Backwoodsman magazine. I don't know if you guys have ever read that magazine, but the Backwoodsman magazine. Good how-to magazine. And
I'm almost done.
you guys down here and hold that? Okay. I'm going to move around. Alright. So, we have our piece of pork belly here. Putting it on a scale. Almost 4 pounds. So pretty easy from that point. We're going to put it in our bag. This is simple enough. My kids have done it in college dorms. So, this is pretty chaotic. Makes me feel right at home. So if I always start with the sugar on my bacon. I like sweet bacon. I don't know if everybody else does. You can always do this recipe without the sugar. You can cut down the amount of sugar. You can use the dark brown sugar, which gives you more of a molasses flavor. You can add molasses instead of sugar. I would cut down on the amount of molasses I added if I did that. So 4 pounds, I put 4 tablespoons. I'm putting 2 on this side. Not without it.
It's the grinder was.
Yeah, I know. So if you do.
And then I'm putting I'll put 4 tablespoons of the Tender Quick. I'm going to tell you this about Tender Quick. Sugar, you notice that big old heaping tablespoon. Tender Quick, I do level tablespoons because it does get salty.
Right now, it's,
2 on this side.
now can you pick up Tender Quick just like at Walmart?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I live in a county in Kansas that only has 5,000 people. We've got 2 grocery stores. Both of them carry Tender Quick. You can find it at most small grocery stores. If you can't find it at a regular grocery store, a Hispanic grocery store will carry Tender Quick.
Okay.
And they can be ordered directly from Morton. In the fall, in the hunting season, our Walmart carries Tender Quick. Usually back in the hunting aisle.
Okay.
But
Sometimes you can find it with like the canning supplies and the
Yes.
jerky, seasonings and supplies. And some will even have it like with the ice cream salt, like the different types of salts and stuff.
Yes.
yeah,
You'll find
a
it
lot of
there,
times
the
it'll be just a
spice
whole
and salt
Morton section.
Yeah.
Of all their products.
The things you don't normally use, you don't notice.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So we've got on each side this 4-pound piece of belly. On each side we've got 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of Morton Tender Quick, and now I'm going to rub that in.
You should talk about if it's bone-in and vastly injectable.
I don't do a lot of bone-in curing, but when you do, you really need to use a brine and inject that against the bone. When you cure bone-in, the first place your meat will sour, will start to rot, is against the bone. It'll bone sour. So if you do that, you just, Morton Tender Quick usually has a brine recipe on the back of it, how to mix it, how much water with the product, and then inject that against the bone so that you don't sour there first. We like this well enough that it's pretty much bacon hams, it all gets done about like this.
A deer that's really good to take a roast
And so we rub that into all the surface. It needs to be on the edges. It needs to be in any little fold. And if you end up with more in there than it takes to cover it, it's okay. Leave it in there.
Is it important for the meat to be real dry before you start?
You don't want it running. You don't want it oozing.
So like to pat it dry with a
Yeah.
paper towel or whatever?
If that's an issue, yes. But the point of curing is to pull water out
So it's
and to
gonna
put
do-
salt in.
Yeah.
So what part of our process here, I'm going to push all the air I can out. And that's not terribly important, but I push a lot out so that it'll lay flat mostly.
Sorry.
Cheap Ziploc bags. And salt in them. Same problem I had with the vacuum seal bags.
Sometimes if you flip the edge down
Yeah.
before you put your meat and your stuff in it, flip the edge down.
And then
when
roll
you
it
go
back
to
up.
seal it, pull it back up, and you won't end up with stuff in the zip rack.
All right. How are we doing on time?
I don't know. It's
Okay.
2:26.
So this is our product, or our bacon. This is the process. We just put the salt and the sugar on it. We're going to put this in the refrigerator for 7 days. Okay? Turn it over every day as a general rule. I usually put a date on one side. That way I know what day I put it in with the marker. I turn it over. I know one day's no date, the other day's the date, the next day's the date. That way when I'm turning over, I'll have 20 or 30 packages in the refrigerator. I know I've got them all turned over. Like marking an egg in an incubator, right? So we turn it over every day for 7 days. And as you get in second and third day, this will be full of liquid because it's pulling that out. And basically the salt and the sugar and the liquid that's in the pork is going to pull out. It's creating its own brine. And then as you're turning it over, you're pushing it back through the meat. So you're making a saline solution with the moisture that was already in the meat. And it pulls back through there, and that creates your cure, right? And all the recipes tell you, take that out of the refrigerator after 7 days, rinse it off, and eat it. It'll be so salty your cows won't lick it. And I've done that more than once and wasted some pork because I couldn't figure out how to make it edible. Here's my trick that I learned. And I don't even know how we learned this. I clean my sink out. I will take that meat out of there. After 7 days, I wash it off really good. And then I put cold water in my sink, and I put all my meat in there, and I soak it for 2 hours in cold water. After about an hour, I look at my water. If my water has a lot of scum on the top of it, salt, right? Has a lot of scum on the top of it, I drain the water and fill it with cold water again, so that I'm keeping cold, clean water on this for 2 hours. And then after 2 hours, I slice a chunk off the outside, which will be the saltiest part. I fry it in the skillet, and if it's still too salty, I change the water again. But usually 2 hours does pretty good on pork belly. It will soak the water out. And you ended up with a cured meat, but then you've pulled the excess salt back out of it with your cold water. And that's the way we make our bacon not so salty you can't eat it, and it makes it really a good flavor. And actually the texture of soaking it in cold water is good. If you like it smoked, when you get done doing that, you need to dry it off really well, and then you put it in the refrigerator for 2 hours, and you allow a pellicule to form on the outside. Basically, it's a sticky film forms on the outside, sitting out in the open air in your refrigerator. It creates a pellicule, and what that pellicule, that sticky film, does is it grabs the smoke. It holds the smoke flavor onto your meat. And so if you're going to smoke your meat, any of these, they need to set in the refrigerator for about 2 hours open, not covered, not in the crisper. They need to be where just the air's flowing around them. That creates a pellicule on your meat.
Same if you're adding the black pepper. You
Yeah.
want that pellicule to hold the pepper.
Yeah, and that's one of our favorite ways to make the bacon is to cure it and let it dry in the refrigerator, form that pellicule, and then I cover it in coarse ground black pepper. That's good. That's good bacon. That'll make a bacon tomato sandwich now.
But it has to have the 7 days with that amount of salt in order to get completely
Yep.
through the meat. If you cut your time short or you cut your salt down, trying not to get too salty, you're not gonna have enough to press through the whole mass of that meat.
If you begin to experiment with bigger cuts of meat,
It's gonna be longer.
yeah, and one of the ways you need to check that is at the time period where you think you've been in there long enough, you need to cut into your meat and you will see a color change. Just like on a smoked brisket, how you see the smoke ring, you will see a cure ring on your meat. And you will see a gray meat and a pink meat. And that pink is cured. And so you want to make sure that you're cured all the way through. And if 7 days hasn't done it, you're doing like a round off a ham or a big piece of ham. If 7 days hasn't done it, I'd put another amount of cure. I'd do my same recipe again so that you've got enough salt that you want a saline environment so that bacteria can't grow. Make sure you're getting enough salt in there. But on jowls and pork belly, 7 days is plenty. We've done the right amount of salt and sugar. It will go through it. Even our bacon is usually about that thick, and we were talking about thickness of bacon earlier. See how that bacon's about that thick? When we do a 350-pound hog, it's like that, right? And that's the way we like our bacon. We also use a lot of lard, and we're producing lard that way too. But that's our bacon making process. I've got one finished and some half done. Time.
It's 2:30.
All right. And I've got till 5 o'clock, right, Cheryl?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions about the bacon? Make sense?
Yes.
Simple process.
So it's about 4 pounds the max you can get in that bag.
That
Is
gallon
about
bag, yeah,
4
Would you do a 2-gallon bag? and
we
do a bigger
usually
one?
do. We usually use a 2-gallon bag. We didn't have one in the kitchen when we were loading stuff up the other day, so
So because your pigs are so fat,
yeah, we're using that 2-gallon bag. Yep.
And we're typically 4 to 6 of those bags.
Yeah.
you use like what, 1 slice of bacon per sandwich?
Yeah.
No, but what fun is that? Still put the pile of bacon on that thing.
Yeah, you still
Right?
gotta put 2 or more pieces.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
You got to put 2 or more pieces on
Layer
there.
it.
Yep. So we're going to move on to the sausage making if there's no more questions about the bacon.
Well, it always surprises me how easy the bacon, curing it. Like, it's just so easy to do.
If you don't smoke it, Gary, do you know how long you would smoke that?
Temperature.
I got a pellet smoker that
Okay.
I can do any temperatures.
Temperature is where your variation is. If you're smoking at about 180 to 100 degrees, so 180 and less is considered cold smoking. 190 and higher is considered hot smoking. If you're hitting that top end of the cold smoke, I'm going to say that most of this will be done through in 6 hours.
Okay.
But the point of smoking bacon is not to cook it. That's not the point. The point is that smoke coating the outside.
Could you do a probe and take it to a temperature?
Yeah. So pork's done at 156.
All right.
So you cook it to 156 and you can slice it and use it like lunch meat or fry it a little bit real quick in the pan if you like limp bacon. And that's another thing we do. A lot of times we'll roll black pepper on it after it's cured. We'll put it in the oven at 200 degrees, let it get to 156, and then we slice it. You got to let it rest before you slice it, like a brisket. But we'll slice it, and then when you cook it, you just kind of stir it around the skillet and get it hot. You don't have to worry about cooking it through, and you've got a cooked product already.
Yeah.
And that's a way to do that. You can do that with the smoker too.
So 6 hours and bring the probe to 156.
Yep. Yep. And you'll be a cooked product.
All right.
And I would say, I know that with the electric smokers, Hank, you can put heat for a while and not smoke. I would put smoke on it the whole time.
Yeah, I can do super smoke. And
Yeah.
I I run real good at 175, 180.
Yep.
If I go below that, sometimes I stall.
Yeah. That when you go below that, I'm talking about making bacon that is for the purpose of flavoring bacon. If you're making bacon for the purpose of curing it to where it can keep without refrigeration, then we're talking about cold smoking, and we're talking about temperatures below 180, but more like 130, and that's a whole different process.
All right, thank you.
Yep. So, my beautiful assistant has ground this pork. We use the small plate. I
I
think that's what-
typically use the large one, but I dropped it in the grass.
Okay.
So we had to use the small one.
So we use the small plate today.
Didn't think we wanted grass in our,
We like we're gonna do bulk Italian sausage and we're gonna do stuffed Italian sausage today. Those kind of sausages, breakfast sausage, Italian sausage, 10 to 20% fat. When we do summer sausages and things like that, we like to do 10% fat or maybe a little less, but right around that 10%. I've done deer sausage without adding any fat, and it's a little dry and crumbly, but the flavor and the texture on it's amazing. So it can be done. So our sausage recipe. I'm going to tell you guys, when you start figuring out how to make sausage, for a long time I was like a recipe fiend. I started looking at recipes everywhere I could find them, every book, a lot of old how-to books that I would find. I take some magazines that have recipes in them sometimes. In this book, when my wife and I were really getting into homesteading, when our kids were really young, I found this book at Atwood's. Okay, right now, White
Harvest Seed. has
White
it.
Harvest Seed up here in the main building has this book.
It's a 3 copies. Basic
Stories,
country
basic country skills.
Stories, Basic Country Skills. There is all kinds of stuff here. If you want to know how to wire your house, that's in the front of the book. If you want to know how to put in vinyl flooring, that's in the middle of the book. If you want to know how to raise a pig or a turkey, that's in the back of the book. Making ice cream, it's right here. That's where my wife has a marker, see? And it's just a little bit about everything. But there's a recipe in here out of another book by a guy named Charles Revis, which is an old sausage making book. I think everybody that's ever looked at sausage recipes has come across one of his recipes. But it's a Italian sausage. He calls it Northern Italian sausage, and there's a lot of variants you can do with it. I'm going to tell you guys that I never take a recipe and do exactly what it says every time. I've never done that. I've got to try. Sometimes I change things because of what's available to me. Sometimes I change things because of what we prefer. Sometimes I just want to see if I can do something different, right? But this recipe, it calls for 3 pounds of meat. It calls for a tablespoon and a half of salt. Or I'm sorry, a teaspoon and a half of salt.
They're right there on the front of
Oh, there they are. Calls for a teaspoon and a half of salt. It calls for freshly ground black pepper. It calls for coriander, ground coriander, and 2 cloves of garlic. And you can add a teaspoon of crushed red pepper if you want to. I'm going to tell you how I change it. We forage garlic. German white garlic grows in our part of Kansas in every bar ditch. And it's amazing good garlic. And so we just harvest it. We forage that. We grow some. We've planted some on our homestead. They grow in our beds too. And then we dehydrate that on an old Ronco dehydrator that cooks a little hot. And so it makes like a roasted garlic powder. And so instead of using garlic, just a clove of fresh garlic, we use this. And it adds some dimension to the flavor, right? So, I'm going to take right here. When you do sausage, one of the tips I'm going to give you is that you put your seasoning together and then sprinkle it a little bit at a time onto your meat. All right? So, Oh yeah, I forgot something else I add to it. I add onion powder to mine too. But anyhow, so we've got, should have 3 pounds of meat in this roughly.
That bowl's gonna weigh a bunch.
Okay.
Take your
Well,
little
you know
bowl.
what? We're gonna say it's 3 pounds of meat. We
Take like,
3 pounds to me.
huh?
how much was it when we started?
It was just a couple ounces over 3 pounds, and
Yeah,
we've
well,
got that
that's
much
in there.
stuck in the neck. So, we're gonna say that's 3 pounds of meat. We're gonna put in a teaspoon and a half of salt. Kinda, yeah.
And you can add a little more if you like it.
Yep. I did that wrong. I was supposed to do that in there.
Yep.
I'm fired, Cheryl. So I guess I'm going to put the rest of it in this bowl like I'm supposed to. We've got the salt in there. We're going to do the black pepper. I don't do freshly ground most of the time because this is pretty handy. But I do the coarse ground. I think it adds some flavor to it. It's a little different.
Take a little. You just don't fit through that little hole.
I've got my mind going in 90 different directions right now.
You act like the first time you ever measured that into there.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, a lot of times it might just get, that looks good. But I know this recipe, my just guessing is based off of this recipe. And I've added sage to this recipe. I've added different pepper to this recipe. We've added rosemary to this recipe. This is our base, and we add all kinds of stuff to it. He calls it an Italian sausage. You add a little sage to it, it's a breakfast sausage. You add a little jalapeno to it, it's a hot one. You know?
Fennel in it?
Huh? No.
Fennel in there?
No.
But you can add fennel.
You can. Yeah, I haven't, but
About
you
a
can.
teaspoon. About a teaspoon. Sage you want just under a teaspoon.
You know something else I've added to it that really makes a good sausage? Is I've added dill to it. Dill makes a good sausage. So,
Did you do about a teaspoon of black pepper on that?
yeah, teaspoon of black pepper. We've got a teaspoon and a half of salt in the wrong spot. We've got, maybe I ought to have my wife measure while I talk. So I've got the salt in there already, black pepper, add the rest of it
Okay.
to the bowl.
Okay.
Teamwork.
Yeah,
Did you get 2 teaspoons of pepper or 1?
one. What's
Okay.
it call for?
2.
Oh, calls for 2.
You're fired. You're fired.
Out of a cannon. So guys, sausage is really just seasoned ground meat, and you can make that any way you like. One of the most amazing things about sausage is you can make it your own. You figure out, I use a base recipe to start, but you figure out what seasonings you like,
It's coriander too.
and you start adding and playing with that. Adding, paprika. You start using things like smoked salt instead of regular salt. You can start changing flavors and make sausage however you want to make it. And a cool thing about sausage making and bacon making both is they're very involved in making your own food. I like to be able to serve something to my friends and to my family and it be mine. It be something that is my creation, not something that everybody else bought at Walmart too, right? And so sausage is like that. And sausage is involved and experiential. When you start putting seasonings in, you're going to start smelling it. And I don't know how to, I guess you guys, hopefully you can smell some of this.
Was that onion?
I put a teaspoon of onion powder, a teaspoon of garlic powder, but I had a clove of garlic that didn't get ground up. So when I dumped in there was that clove, so I pulled it out and then put a little bit more garlic powder. And 2 teaspoons of ground coriander, 2 teaspoons black pepper, a teaspoon and a half of salt.
We grind our garlic and all our other spices and our cornmeal with a coffee grinder. It works.
And I didn't run this one through the sieve. I just dumped it in there when I made my last batch of garlic powder. Usually make my own onion powder, but not this year.
So when you start putting these seasonings together, you're going to smell the way they smell together. And if you're paying attention and you don't have the virus, it's going to change when you put it in the meat. The smell of it will change when you put it in the meat. And that's where the experiment comes from. I think everybody that grew up in a sausage making home has probably talked about moms and grandmas putting all the seasoning and the meat together and then cooking a little bit of it and tasting it. And that's one way to get started on kind of what it tastes like. But I'm going to tell you, you cook it or you mix it all together and you let it sit in the refrigerator for 4 hours, it's going to taste different than it did when you cooked it in the skillet. And you let it sit in the freezer for a couple of months and then you bring it out and thaw it out again, it's going to taste different. Time makes a difference in your sausage too.
You start to notice the more you do things like that. It's just like cooking. The more, like, I don't know, I smell it, see if it smells right. The more you'll learn what smells you're wanting to smell, and you'll just kind of know it's right. It's kind of like that granny thing.
Yeah.
It's that granny thing that, the more you do it, the more things feel right, or your dough, if you're working dough,
Right.
you want the
just
right,
know
so
the
you
texture.
feel it, you see it, you learn that the more you do it. So it's okay to start out and it not turn out the way you want it, because even if you fry it and it doesn't taste like what you want it, you can still go back and add spices to the top of it, even if it's cooked. So nothing's a failure unless you, of course, sour your meat, if your meat ruins. But yeah, it's just, that's the thing, just keep playing with it, keep trying, don't stop.
So I guess one tip on sausage is it works better with cold meat. Grinding it works better. Mixing the sausage works better. She's got our seasoning mixed here. We're going to sprinkle just a little bit on this. We're going to mix it all up.
So do you typically mix it and then put it back in the fridge for a bit to get it cold again?
Sometimes. A lot of times I've got an ice chest when I'm doing batches, and it's setting while I'm getting everything wrapped, and sometimes it's like 2 hours, and I put it all in an ice chest on ice, so I get everything done and cleaned up, and then it goes to the freezer. So we've got 2 or 3 hours age on it before it goes to the freezer. But if I was just doing a little batch to cook, I would definitely let it sit in the fridge for a while. Then we'll add a little more after we get some mixing in there.
Best 12 to 24 hours. If you're going to cook it immediately, it's best 12 to 24 hours to rest in the refrigerator. The only thing that is a have to that you don't want to go less is the salt, because that's going to be your little bit of preservative there.
And the content of your fat will change your flavor some. So if you're doing deer, which is a leaner meat, you need to be careful how much seasoning you're getting. In a leaner meat, flavors will show up a lot stronger than they will in a fatter meat. And fatter meat helps distribute flavor. So if you're using a big old fat hog and you got 20-25% fat, your seasoning, you're going to need a little more seasoning. If you're doing it out of a deer and there isn't hardly any fat and you've not added much fat, you're going to use a little less seasoning.
So you said when you do your deer, you typically add a little pork fat?
I do a lot of times. I'll add 10% pork fat. A lot of times we keep some pork fat for that, but we also have a local butcher in our area that keeps fat on him during hunting season, and we'll sell you however much you need. And it's all local produced. It's stuff that he's custom processed. So
I know people who add beef fat in their dip also, and that'll change your flavor a little bit.
Yeah.
as well.
it will. So, and also Beef fat doesn't go as far, so if you'd add 10% pork fat, you'll add about 12% beef fat. When I was in Wyoming working at the butcher shop there, when we did a lot of elk and moose, and they would add beef fat to a lot of those, and you add a little more. Okay, so this sausage can set and rest a little while. You can package it. You can put this in a bag. You can wrap. I make packages and roll them in, wrap them in plastic and put them in butcher paper to keep them from freezer burning. That sausage is ready to go. The next step we're going to talk about is casing sausage. So how's my time?
Got 30 minutes. 30 minutes.
Okay. So we're going to do some casing. Any questions about sausage so far? That process is the same regardless of what your ingredients are. So we just chose to use the Italian sausage because that's the base we use for everything. It's kind of a simple, it's called Italian sausage, and with us adding the onion to it and that roasted garlic, it definitely has that flavor. But you add one or two other things and you completely change the flavor profile of it. So.
Yeah, it's not Italian.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're waiting to go.
So you can like ultimately like start it with that base and then separate it and then try different things to each one, and then that way you kind of know what it tastes like, you know what you like.
That's dried and ground cayennes out of our garden, and we're going to use that here in a minute. So we're going to stuff. In a minute when we're done, guys, you're welcome to copy off any of the notes I have. And we're going to talk about summer sausage recipe in a minute. So we're going to stuff this sausage. You guys know what these are? It's a jerky shooter, right? It's a jerky shooter. Those were invented in Emporia, Kansas. So. And they're still made there. But this is a jerky shooter. Walmart's sold these kind of products. KFL has sold these kind of Bass Pro. This is a really good sausage stuffer. I use the round for shooting the meat links, and I roll my casing on there, and I use it to stuff sausage. It works great. If you don't have a stuffer, if you're just buying ground meat or you're having ground meat at the butcher and you want to turn it into a sausage, this is a lot cheaper than buying a grinder or a regular stuffer. This is an easy, expedient way of stuffing casing. So we've got natural hog casing. This one is a High Mountain, which I guess I better plug that product too. High Mountain makes a lot of sausage kits with seasoning and casings already in them. Good product out of Riverton, Wyoming. American made. All right. Well, thank you guys. You got any more questions? We'll answer them. If you want to come up here while we're finishing cleaning up and ask questions.
Bring it back tomorrow?
Huh?
You'll bring it back tomorrow? Cook?
Well, I think that it might end up cooked before the day's over. We definitely are talking about trying to cook some things. Oh, I got a question. We're going to give away a book. So, Build Your Own Farm Tools is a book that's being sold by
White Harvest Seed.
White Harvest Seed. I've got the business card in here. They're right up here in the building. And this is one of the books they give us to give away. Definitely, they carry a sausage making book that they have sold out of already this week. And they have this book up there too. You can check it out and see if it's something you'd like to purchase. So, we're going to do trivia to give this book away. You got a good trivia question, Cindy?
I don't think she could hear you.
You got a good trivia question?
You be careful standing there in that water.
I know, that's what I was thinking. I'm gonna get,
You should go around the other
I'm gonna get
side.
zipped.
Go around the
There's
other
water
side.
over here too.
Yeah, it's just water everywhere. I think I'm gonna quit.
Slide it this way. It's drier here. I'll do this one.
It's not, there's no water here, so I'll be here. Let's see.
Yeah, it's just a river.
Okay, all right. How many pounds of Morton Tender Quick per pound of meat do you use in curing bacon?
Pounds?
Pound.
No, tablespoon.
How many tablespoons of Morton Tender Quick per pound?
One.
I saw your hand go up first, so. All right.
I thought you was gonna ask who's buried in Grant's tomb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What color was
Washington's white horse?
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to finish up here, guys. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming to this expo.
So here's our sausages. They brought them down here to the oven and cooked them. They're looking amazing.